This is John Davidson and R. Clinton Ohlers, PhD. Hey, Clinton, what's up, buddy?
How you doing, John?
I'm good. Hey, I've got an idea. How about we get my mom or my aunt to join the World Economic Forum? Okay, stick with me. And then I think I might just start like a Bitcoin whatever. I don't really understand. I like video games, and it's kind of video and a game because it's playing with people's lives.
Okay.
So I'll start that.
We could call it Davidson Coin.
Maybe something that sounds official, like FUX. So then what we'll do is we'll take everybody's money, because that's apparently something that we'll do. We'll launder it through the Ukraine, dump a bunch of it in the Democrats and my mom's PAC and everybody else. And everybody packs up the money and gives it to other PACs, and it'll just vanish. Yeah. I think it's a big winner. But we got to get a house in the Bahamas, right? I think that's the big...
Bahamas sound good.
The big takeaway. So what do you think?
Because you want to avoid U.S. oversight for financial dealings, right?
Right. Yeah. The problem is that Bahamas airport's probably a little small.
Yeah. The problem is it's apparently we're finding out it's so unoriginal an idea.
Right. I mean, basically,
it's been done.
He did everything that the banks do. That's exactly what he did. Takes your money and says, I think I'm going to go invest this in something. And I tell you that I don't have your money. And then if everybody finds out that you're not holding onto their money and they run on you, your bank goes under. So we'll just not do that officially. But that's basically what he's done is nothing different than what the banks do.
Are you sure about that?
Basically, he just doesn't have FDIC protection. It's it's funny. Last night I spoke with a former Wall Street trader, and she was talking about it, and she's like, "Yeah, this is what they do. This is how the banks operate."
Really?
I mean, it really is a house of cards of confidence. If you lose confidence in an entity, then the entity crumbles. That's why I think it's really not that much different than what the FDA does, CDC. We have to maintain our confidence in the science of medicine. But really what it is faith. And who has faith in the FDA or CDC? Apparently a lot of people are still falling for it.
Well, and a lot of people are losing faith.
Yeah, so to recap for everyone, this is actually me being facetious. This is also basically kind of what happened with Sam Bank... Was it Sam Bankman-Fried?
Sam Bankman-Fried, yes.
SBF.
As he's popularly known in the crypto circles. Yeah.
It's amazing, this whole story. I was trying to tell Clinton about it this weekend. I was like, you've got to pay attention. This is huge. This is like a head of the Hydra that we've just found. Sam Bankman-Fried came out of obscurity a few weeks around the time that Biden announced his plan to run for president. Now, if you recall, I believe that Biden announced his plan to run for president at the home of a former Universal Studios executive who now works for the Biden presidency. But it's interesting because once this kid announced this currency exchange, it exploded. Everybody was using it. I think Tom Brady got burned in this.
Well, Tom Brady was a partner because I remember hearing about it because people were asking me about it because I'm active in the markets. And they said, hey, there's this new cryptocurrency coming out and Tom Brady's involved. And I think it could be really big. I mean, it's going to have, Tom Brady has a lot of people's trust. Right. I mean, he has a very clean reputation and is somebody a lot of people admire. So it seemed like could potentially be a good investment. My thought was like, do we need another cryptocurrency?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't. I mean,
apparently, if you want to launder money through Ukraine to the Democratic Party, then the answer is yes.
There's honestly, there's so much to this story. I can't believe it. But basically, this was one of these cryptocurrency exchanges, basically operating like a bank. They would hold your money. They would exchange your money for other currencies. You could cash it out, you could cash it in, and as if the currencies that you held, like Bitcoin's price goes up and down, it's kind of all over the place. You could then profit by just keeping your money in this thing. And like all good Ponzi schemes, he would pay you back from the money that new people put in. Meanwhile, he was going out giving $38+ million to the Democrats this year, $5 million to Big Guy Joe, I think around $6 or $8 million, maybe $9 million to Nancy Pelosi's House Majority PAC, and then that money then goes into media companies. Right? I think of the $27 million that he donated to Protect Our Future, $20 million of that went to a media company in Virginia, I believe.
Yeah. And just just to clarify for anybody listening, that there was both an exchange and a coin. So the exchange, the company that ran the exchange where you could buy whatever kind of crypto through them, was FTX. And then they also had their own coin, FTT. So that's what we're speaking about, both those things kind of at once.
Now, this story has so many amazing elements to it. One, the girl. So he had an Alameda. Was it Alameda Finance?
Mm-hmm. It was a hedge fund.
Yeah, Alameda, whatever, and that was run by Sam's girlfriend, Carolyn Ellison. Carolyn Ellison's
who is the
dad,
daughter of...
Yeah, she was the daughter of a guy at MIT that hired Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, to handle something at MIT where he worked.
The former boss of the now head of the SEC. Yeah.
Right. So now the guy that is supposed to, investigate crypto and all these companies and all the insider trading that's not being investigated. He's also a former Goldman Sachs guy. It's all dirty. This is so dirty. Every element of it that you find is dirty. These guys were dumping money into pandemic, response funds.
Well, yeah, wasn't it Bankman-Fried's, the Fried Bankman, wasn't it his brother who was involved in the pandemic promotion,
right,
preparedness organization,
right,
that, if I'm correct, also helped suppress the information on ivermectin?
Yes. So FTX sponsored a Together trial that said, "Oh, ivermectin totally doesn't work. Continue to spend money on vaccines and other drugs like remdesivir that we know totally don't work. Don't work. In fact, remdesivir hurts you, but whatever. This whole thing is a nasty gravy train, but probably the worst part about it, Clinton, that really pisses me off, is that they were moving money to and from Ukraine. And the interesting thing about moving money to and from Ukraine is it's laundering. So the United States gives billions of dollars to Ukraine, and one way or another, this guy now has $15 billion of his own, and he gives $40 million, and one of his other executives did another $8 or $9 million, I think. So nearly $50 million from people at this company went into Democratic coffers. But don't worry, about 105,000 went to Republicans.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that was just for the midterms. We're not saying that there wasn't other money.
No.
That was just for the midterms. Now, presumably, it was also channeling money to things like his brother's company that would have been used for promoting the pharmacological industrial complex that was promoting the vaccine, suppressing free speech in order to maximize these boondog profits off the vaccine in the face of fantastic curative alternatives like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. So the incestuousness of this and the nested, commingled interests going back to the 2020 election, and the midterms, the role of the pandemic in the election, the role of the pandemic in creating these enormous big pharma profits. I mean, it all is coalescing. I mean, it's the head of a hydra. I mean, it really is. We're seeing all these things coalescing here. And as if a sort of icing on the cake is the connection with Ukraine, that the money is, and this is what I think is one thing that's really important for people to understand, is how much, like, there's a real beauty to the fact that this all broke, okay? And that people like Tom Brady, as much as we like him, have been really, really burned and financially hurt by this, is that people are going to have to wake up and follow the money. They're going to have to wake up. Normal people who would otherwise not have to dig into this stuff or open their eyes are going to be highly motivated to understand what went on right. because they lost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars.
They sure
and
did.
What was going, and this isn't new, right? This was just one of the latest installments. So it's my understanding that a lot of what goes on with George Soros is the same kind of thing. We think, well, George Soros is extraordinarily wealthy, so he can give his money to whom he wants. But does he really? Or does Soros give money that is actually getting kicked back through other routes, so that Soros is not actually funding from his own, munificence these left-wing causes, but rather he's using taxpayer money to do that and then recoup. And that was exactly what was going on here. So now we've got SBF, right, who is now the second biggest donor to the financial donor of the Democratic Party after George Soros. And what's he's doing? He's got this set up so that funds going into Ukraine are coming through FTX. And then they get channeled back to the Democratic Party through his generous giving. So he's making all of this money on the exchange fees going into, for these funds going into Ukraine. And obviously enriching himself in the process.
Now, the part that everyone's super excited. Oh, we've nailed this down. They did this. They did this. They were bailing out Alameda with $4 billion from the other company, which is a complete felony. I mean, they were doing all of these things, but they're all linked to Obama, to the SEC, to MIT, to Stanford. These are people that are institutional, and they're taking advantage of Americans. But the part that no one really appreciates is that to put together this type of scheme, this racket, or whatever you want to call it, especially when it comes to laundering funds from the Ukraine, requires planning. Like a year's worth of planning to pull it off. And in order to plan, that would imply that this was in the works prior to the war with Russia. Which makes you really wonder, was the war with Russia? Remember how everyone was really saying, like, oh, why is Boris pushing for war? I mean, they were Americans, and Boris, they didn't want to avoid war. They wanted to make sure it happened. The posture of the Americans going into it against Russia was very odd. And if we find out that the Ukrainian...
Oh, wow, okay, I see. I guess I'm slow on the uptake here. So yeah,
Ukrainian
I just see
war,
the significance of what you're saying. Is you're saying that the war is, like, we already had established that Ukraine is a super laundering hub for major globalist corruption, particularly the Biden crime family, right? Mm-hmm. And shutting down the corruption was something Trump was trying to do, and was hopefully a one possible positive outcome of the war in Ukraine.
Right.
But what you're pointing out is that a war in Ukraine is in fact beneficial to the same interests, because it now allows them to send humanitarian and even military funds over there,
right,
a portion of which they are kicking back to themselves for their political purposes.
Think about all of the marketing that went into supporting Ukraine to push Americans to give, it wasn't necessarily to push Americans to give, although there was a lot of effort to encourage donations. But what they really wanted was to grease the mind of Americans with the I Stand with Ukraine movement and all the banners and flags and everything that was suddenly there and about this country nobody knew anything about, except for, of course, Joe and Hunter and some people at the CIA who were part of Burisma. But the goal was to just prepare Americans for the idea that America was going to start funding Ukraine and this indefinite war.
Yeah.
which means
and look at who one of the main players of that is. Like every night here, the local news will flash. Not that I watch it that often, but every time I see it, right, you see that we support the people of Ukraine, and you get the blue and yellow logo and all that. Mm-hmm. And so once again, it seems that the media is lockstep in with this. In other words, there's none of these things that occur without the media being the dispensary to public opinion of what they're doing. And we still saw this back in the pandemic with the Trusted Media Initiative, where the different major news organizations came together to say this was the narrative we're going to push, right?
Yeah.
This is the narrative that backs the CDC and the NIAID and Fauci and all of this, and they coordinated. And anything that's not that narrative, which was, pro-vaccine, anti-therapeutics, stay at home until you're ready to go to the emergency room, that kind of stuff, that destructive narrative which caused so many of people's lives, that was part of the Trusted News Initiative. So every time we turn around, they're in lockstep with some larger purpose, which is pretty nefarious.
Which means the Ukrainian war, the people that died in it, and the money that went to it, the weapons that went to it, was all possibly a grift performed by Biden and his people, his handlers. That's what happened.
Now what I think what you're pointing at is that obviously it was Putin who invaded, but Putin,
so
much of his motivation, as I understand, was that we were pressuring him with NATO. So this was his Cuban Missile Crisis.
Exactly.
And he's also aware that he's got a very significant den of corruption that's feeding Western opponents, and has got these biolabs, right? So Putin had multiple motives to go in and mop up Ukraine.
Yes, he did.
But our government certainly did nothing to prevent that.
No, we wanted this war.
Promoted it.
This right. and what do they say we do with Russia? If you realize that everything that was projected onto Trump is what is being done now, were we colluding with Russia on the war with Ukraine to bilk that country and ours? Now, who gets those funds? Who's involved in the Ukrainian war? Who else is involved?
I would be suspicious
Kingdom?
that we were cooperating with Putin. I think that there was no disadvantage to provoking Putin, right? There was an advantage to provoking Putin, and it was precisely this: a now another flow of funds to go into Ukraine, and an opportunity to siphon a major portion of that off to enrich themselves.
Right. And now we hear that there are Nazis in Ukraine that we're supporting. What the heck is going on over there? And our weapons that we were funneling over to the Ukraine are showing up on the black market. Something's not right. And this highly organized laundering scheme created by Bankman-Fried and Ellison and everyone else involved, the Democrat Party. Do you know who gets the majority of the funds that go to the Democrats, by the way? It's not going to Democrats. It's going to networks and television stations. Those that $27 million goes to, 20 of it goes to screen something buyer. I have to look it up, but this money is going from their coffers mostly to media buyers. Same thing happens on the Republican side, by the way. I also investigated the Senate Leadership PAC. Their money goes to a company called Main Street Media Group, which is also known as Crossroads Media, which is also known as, at the same office address as Michael Dubke, Trump's very short-term communications director, I think, in 2017, who owns BlackRock Media Group. And they did all the ad buys and didn't appear to spend any money for Kari Lake, but they spent a lot of money for Dr. Oz in opposition ads against John Fetterman, which clearly worked wonders. Now, I think the Senate the Senate leadership PAC is controlled by Mitch McConnell. So you have like these factions within the Republican Party, and they have sort of a real bone to pick with Trump. So they will support your Karl Roves, your Tom Ridges, Mitt Romneys, but they don't support the Trump guys. So they're basically, I think they're your rhinos.
Well, there's an excellent piece on Substack that addresses all this and ties it into what was going on with FTX, and that's from a Substack author under the handle Cognitive Carbon, and he explains in detail what was going on. It's really worth a read. But in particular, what's fascinating is he lays out a number of the motives of what he would say a larger cabal that is behind this, and that would be the cabal of the all those who benefit from the control of fiat currencies by these reserve banks and the threat that they're under based on the emergence of cryptocurrencies. And so, but how does that tie into what you just said about McConnell and these other guys? What he points out is that it's not a Democrat versus Republican divide that we're looking at. It is a uniparty of Democrats and rhinos, people like Mitch McConnell, obviously. Okay, now names are starting to slip.
Lindsey
my mind,
Graham
but,
probably is in that group.
Okay, Lindsey Graham's probably flirting that, and who was the former presidential candidate, the war hero. Who was so terrible.
McCain?
And lost to McCain, thank you. So McCain, his daughter, the former vice president under Bush, Cheney, Liz Cheney, all of these, the Bushes, they're all part of this rhino globalist establishment that benefits from the status quo.
Right.
And the bilking of common people across the globe by these Federal Reserve systems. And in opposition to that, you have the America First movement, and you have somebody like Donald Trump, who is the single greatest threat to that system.
Right.
And therefore must be defeated at all costs. And so, in fact, you see this, we should put a link to it later, but there's a great video that you probably can only get it on BitChute or Rumble now, but it was all over YouTube for years. And it was, this video will get President Trump elected. Now, there were several of them, but the one that I'm referring to is the one that's his speech from October the October right before the election, where he lays out this, basically the system of these globalist media, financial, political class interests that are out to enrich themselves. And he just lays it out. And what this author, Cognitive Carbon, is saying is basically, this is we're seeing an exact expression of this, in that you had this globalist elite, banking political class who benefits immensely from, fiat currencies and their devaluation. And the thing that they want least is an alternative form of currency, which is a one-to-one exchange between, me and you. That's not good for them.
It's not good for any bank.
The benefit here, so he's proposing that there's multiple motives. That a benefit here, it's not just a standalone Democratic Party money laundering scheme, right? It also has additional benefit of putting a black eye on cryptos and increasing regulation of cryptos, doing all the things, therefore, opening the door for all of the things that will actually make crypto an ineffective alternative to fiat currency.
Yeah. So it was even in discussion with FTX was in discussions, I think, with Gensler at the SEC about monopolizing currency exchanges over Coinbase. So the FTX would then become like the de facto digital currency exchange platform. But wow, it all fell down incredibly fast. Now,
okay, does anyone...
I need to tell you, the one interesting thing popped up, because, I map out everything on my little Google map. So I have like a whole world view of all these different entities, and birds of a feather do tend to flock together, right? So when I came up with Crossroads Media, Main Street Media, 66 Canal Center Plaza, Suite 555, Alexandria, Virginia. That's how I discovered Michael Dubke was involved with it. And he's originally a 2012 dark money guy, so they were doing dark money before it was cool. And there were a lot of questions about it, just like there are on the Democrat side. There's a lot of questions about why Nancy Pelosi controls the House Majority PAC and why they were spending millions on a campaign in Oregon this year. But what I found to be interesting was, and this was a story that I worked on before I think you and I teamed up, was there was a company called Michael Baker International. And they were hired by my little Laguna Niguel City Council to do some engineering work on a building. No big deal. I just happened to look into it. Michael Baker International owned a company called Sallyport. Sallyport was involved in Balad Air Force Base in Iraq. And there were a lot of allegations of, like, they were bringing in prostitutes to the base. They were smuggling contraband into the base. They silenced whistleblowers, and it all got blown over. And there was no real ramification for what they were doing. That company, Michael Baker International, has also a corporation and an LLC. And in my city council, the former city council lawyer, tried to imply that the companies weren't connected, and my statement was, no, they are. And I really don't think that we should be supporting companies that bring hookers onto the base. That's just my theory, and especially when we had 5 F-15s on this base, or F-16s, and everybody was drunk. It's not a great thing. But the point why I'm bringing this up is that Main Street Media, Crossroads Media, Blackstone Group, it's right next door to Michael Baker International in Alexandria, Virginia. And Michael Baker International is right next to DC Capital Partners, who owns Michael Baker International and Sallyport. And DC Capital Partners is linked to John Kelly, the former general, I believe.
Wow.
And a whole lot of other big players like this. So what we're looking at is a whole lot of swamp right in one place. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. You see from all this, like how thick and deep the swamp is. Right. And to launch off of what you were talking about earlier with Mitch McConnell and things, like you can see now how the response to the midterms has been so scripted. So that what the media does is do everything you can to make it look like the Republicans didn't have a good showing. The red wave, faltered, and then blame it on Trump. And then the rhinos, all of the same, usual suspects, raise their ugly heads. Paul Ryan raises his ugly head again, back from Fox News, back from, having left Congress. Now he's out there promoting DeSantis, right? And everybody's promoting DeSantis as the alternative to Trump, based that, and promoting this narrative that the reason the midterms didn't pan out was because of Trump. Now, when we have so many glaring examples of that these key elections were stolen through voter fraud, just as they were in 2020 and just as they were in 2018, and call me an election denier. The reason I'm an election denier is because I'm not a reality denier. Okay, this stuff has been clear, all the way back to when, who was it? The comedian who was not very funny, and got booted because of sexual harassment. Al Franken.
Oh no, I was going to say Louis C.K.
He stole his seat from the Republican in Minnesota, who was clearly ahead and was set up to be the clear winner by the same method. Votes are suddenly found in the night after the things have been tallied, and it was almost comical then. I mean, somebody found votes in his desk. And those were included, and all the Hollywood elite were jumping in. Willie Nelson sending money to support Franken. And eventually what happens is that they just keep coming up with more votes and more votes and more votes. And nobody questions at any purposeful level, why are all these votes just keep materializing? Right? How do you keep finding votes? And how do they keep favoring the guy who's behind? And, and with all the money coming in from Hollywood, Franken's opponent just couldn't afford to keep it going. I mean, their campaign was out of money. And so what you do is you exhaust the financial resources of your opponents that way. But here's the thing, it's now in retrospect, I see how concerning it is that as a country, regardless of your political point of view, we weren't outraged by what occurred in Minnesota. Because that model we've now seen repeat itself out again and again and again. How many times did that happen in 2018? How many seats? 14 in one election were flipped in that exact manner. And then we saw an entire presidential election flipped in that manner. And then we're now seeing, Nevada, right? We've got a story in World Tribune today about Nevada where the Democrat was behind and he would have had to get an astounding 63% of all the remaining votes in order to out the Republican who had won the election.
And he got it.
And guess what happens in the middle of the night with the cameras off, right? Suddenly, they just found, and what magically, it's 63%. He wins 63% of these incoming votes.
Magic.
And all right, now he's the guy. And people aren't questioning this, right? I mean, obviously people like us are questioning it, but there's so much of the public who just, that's okay. Right? It's just normal. Like if this would happen in a third world country 30 years ago, we'd all been like, well, it's obviously fraud. Right? But now, since it's happening here and, for certain people, it's their guys winning. Well, it's obviously not fraud. And to think so is so outrageous as to be,
outrageous.
Deserve its own pejorative label.
Right. Now I have to show you something. Because
but do you see the significance? Where's the outrage from Mitch McConnell about what's going on in Nevada?
He would
Where's
rather
the
have
outrage
Democrats
from Mitch McConnell
than Republican Trumpers in there. Yeah.
Exactly. They're fine. The Paul Ryans and Mitch McConnells are fine with the steal because they're part of the uniparty.
Yeah.
So that is very important for Americans to understand what the real political divides in this country are. They're not truly a Democrat versus Republican. In fact, I even think that's why we, have this, Munchin in West Virginia, who is so good, right? Because that's not where the divide is. The divide isn't Republican versus Democrat. It's globalist elites bought into the financial political class versus everybody else.
It's the people pulling the strings versus the people jumping for the fruit.
Right. And there's this big middle that is just waking up to what's going on. And hopefully FTX will help wake them up more.
Yeah, unfortunately, suffering seems to be the only thing that wakes people up.
No, I mean, it's a biblical principle.
So if there's one thing I think we can agree on is that CNN is now really pushing to be more middle of the road. They're pushing out stories that are unflattering to Democrats. They're pushing out stories that are... Oh, no, wait, they're not. Let's go see where this massive, devastating story sits on CNN.com. If you go to CNN.com, right now, the story for FTX is not on the main page. You have to scroll down a page, and then it says crypto crisis. FTX is just the beginning. Now, if we go in and look at this article by Diksha Madhawk, let's search for the words donor. No? There's no reference to him being a donor. In fact, this story was written in New Delhi for CNN Business. Look, at CNN, we can't cover everything. These little digital deep beep beep computer programmer, whatever. Nobody cares about these stories. Keep going.
It's essential to them that they not cover everything.
So let's search for the term Ukraine. No, we don't. That's not in there, huh? So Gensler? No. In fact, most of the story is missing from the CNN story. So when people say that Chris Licht, the new boss of CNN, who's firing everybody and really, really tightening the screws on this leaky ship, you think he's going to be doing his job, keeping things fair and balanced? No. This is a great example of how Chris Licht is just going to be a very friendly version of Jeff Zucker. In fact, I think Chris Licht is even friends with Biden. So what are you going to do? Are they going to report the important news that actually matters to people? No, they're not.
Yeah.
And that's a real shame. But they've got us, Clinton. So that's our story on FTX.
Well, here's good news, though.
Yeah.
Look at how quickly alternative media picked up on the truth behind what was going on. I mean, it was rapid. We went from one day, I was on Saturday, I was at dinner with friends, and they're saying, hey, what have you heard about this crypto thing? And, expecting that I'd know something because of, what we do and what in my involvement in the markets. And, I knew basically nothing, right? I had heard some crypto went bust, and I'm like, okay, some crypto went bust. This is not a surprise to me. A lot of cryptos are going to go bust, okay? And so I didn't think anything of it. And then by a day later, day and a half later, there are these Substack articles, there's these analyses on YouTube, there's the 99-second explanation that
me
you sent
texting
me.
You 500 things going, dude, pay attention.
Exactly. And but the speed at which the truth is traveling now is extraordinary. And we've got a lot to thank, I think, Elon Musk for in regard to this.
I don't give investment advice, but he's being punished right now. Tesla stock is in the toilet. And Twitter, advertisers are withholding funds. This is not good. And it's punishment, because guess what Elon has? Elon has all of the direct messages that everybody sent the last couple of years.
Nice.
You have to wonder if that's where some of these stories are going to start coming from. But you didn't hear that here.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, maybe you heard it here. No. Can we get paid for that? If so, yes, then you heard it here. But I don't, I'm just guessing, but it would seem to me that if any nefarious situations were going down on Twitter's platform, now they might be exposed.
Have you dug in to how this kid rose to the prominence that he did? I mean, because let's think about where things had ended up when he was still at the heights of his legitimacy, right? You had Kramer calling him like the new J.P. Morgan. Okay, I mean, he was idolized, right, and seen as this major force.
Yeah.
And so, but you look at the guy and you're like, I mean, did he just take his braces off? I mean, this is a young guy, right?
Oh, his girlfriend's even worse.
Oh my gosh, the girlfriend looks like she's in high school.
Yeah.
And so, right, and I mean, obviously, some people look young and young people look young, but the idea that you've got these basically,
children.
I mean, obviously 28. I mean, we can't say that they're children. I mean, now you and I, as we're getting longer in the tooth, right, we start saying that that's children, but it's not. But it's too early in a career to be having that kind of success in a year. Right?
Well, that's why I mean,
like, what made him the person behind FTX? Right, well, that's what I'm trying to understand.
He looked like what people that come out of this world look like. He looked like another young Zuckerberg or whatever else, and we've conditioned ourselves to look. I think as somebody described him as, he looks like he sleeps on a beanbag. He plays World of Warcraft. No. League of Legends. He's a nerdy guy, and well, if he's nerdy, he must know all these little details that I don't understand. So I'm just going to buy more Bitcoins through his.
But don't you think there's more to the story as to how he was set up? I mean, how do you go from zero to multimillionaire CEO, head of this exchange, linked up with somebody like Tom Brady, Obviously, he was already connected. When you look at who his girlfriend's connected to and who his
parents
brother's
were at
connected to, and
Stanford,
who
his
his parents
dad
connected
testified
to.
on
I mean,
behalf of hedge
he
funds.
must have been in some way groomed very quickly for this. And then the question is, if he was with this kind of network that he had around him, how did he boggle it so badly? Like, how did he say, well, it's a good idea to take all the money out and start putting it into start creating an empire of saving these distressed companies like Voyager?
Well,
Okay.
the rumor,
In other words,
the rumor is that all of these Bitcoin and exchanges are operating like this. There's no real regulation on them, not like with banks, and there's no FDIC protection, so you don't have that 100,000 protection.
you're saying any exchange could be doing this, just taking your money, and you're assuming that your money is actually in
Right.
the stuff that you said you bought, but they're just like, hey, free money.
Yeah, and well, look,
So
banks.
is there any evidence that Binance is doing that?
A lot of these
Excuse me.
things are going to go under scrutiny now, and I think if there is a run on other currencies, we may see more of this. But what's special about this one is how much he was doing that was so politically motivated. You know, I mean, Pelosi was
Right.
involved in this. The spider web, as you try to track it, it just gets wilder and wilder, and we are going.
This is what I wonder. Obviously, the origins of this weren't just organic.
No, it
This
was
wasn't
a plan. That's why I
Yeah,
mean,
it wasn't
like,
just some young entrepreneur that had an idea and it was great and it took off.
right.
No, it was set up from the start, and it looks like it was set up with one of the express purposes as a money laundering operation. Okay, but then the question is, what was the takedown? Like, was the takedown organic, or was the takedown orchestrated in some way, and orchestrated by who?
Well, the takedown, I think.
yeah.
Who was the entity that was going to buy them and bail them out? Was it Binance?
I don't
No.
recall. Well, Binance had a lot of money in there, but they offloaded over $500 million once an article came out. I can't remember where, but in one of the niche journalism outlets that covers this kind of stuff, pointed out that this company was basically belly up. And so Binance sells its $500+ million portion, and then basically there's a run on the bank. Now that didn't happen apart apparently from somebody else who was onto this, putting out tweets that alerted people. And so my question is, now Cognitive Carbon, his theory is that basically Bankman-Fried was a stooge, was a useful idiot who got played, and the takedown of this is the globalist fiat currency, reserve bank elites doing this as a means to take out crypto, or put the reins on crypto,
Right.
and minimize the crypto threat. But my thoughts are, this is so bad for the public relations, for the public image of. Well, I guess it's bad for the public image of crypto, but for anybody who's knowing the truth, which they're knowing very rapidly, this is very bad for the Democratic Party and for that very group who supposedly would benefit from the demotion of crypto. So I'm wondering, is this like a white hat operation that outed this, or what?
Well, so Changpeng Zhao is the founder and CEO of Binance, and as of up to 6 days ago, they were going to buy FTX or merge with them and basically bail them out. Then he realized with and he posted a couple of tweets like he was going to back out because they were so insolvent, and that led to the run on FTX.
Okay.
But what's another very interesting thing is FTX was based out of Hong Kong.
Or Alameda was.
No, FTX.
FTX, I thought FTX was out of the Bahamas.
Is out of Bahamas, but he started it out of Hong Kong.
Okay.
Because apparently there was a difference in purchase value of Bitcoin in Asian countries versus America. It costs more, I guess, to buy out of America. but he did something that was amazing, and that's how he kind of got to be famous. SBF was by bypassing this surcharge that went to American purchases of Bitcoin. And he did it by, I think, operating initially out of Hong Kong. So that adds a Chinese component to this. This whole thing is so messy, and I really think that we should ask Gary Gensler and anyone associated with the big banks and FTX and MIT and Stanford, if there's anyone left at the SEC that's not associated with these entities, that's who needs to investigate. And hopefully that person's really hungry and pissed off. That's who we need on it. Because these things are so deep, you have to wonder if there's anyone not affected by it within our organizations of oversight. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you'd think that the FBI would be doing that, but don't even start with that. So who else was doing it? SEC? No, not really. They were trying to legitimize them even more. The FEC? No, I mean, sorry, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, maybe. But what do they do really? What about this guy's tax bill?
Well, I mean, look at Bernie Madoff, right?
Yeah.
So there was a huge Ponzi scheme. And why do these things keep emerging? Well, it's because these organizations well, yeah, there's that. But these regulatory organizations, I mean, they don't sit out and look for trouble to save the public from trouble that's brewing. They at best deal with things after the fact. I mean, there was in the Bernie Madoff thing, there was a Wall Street guy who recognized very quickly that this was a Ponzi scheme, and he went to, I think, to the SEC, whichever one it was, multiple times, reporting that. And what was it? American Greed, that CNBC series is very good, and they've got one on Bernie Madoff and explains all that in that that episode. But this guy, at the risk of his own life, he thought, because he realized this billionaire Madoff is a Ponzi scheme, and am I going to get offed before I get this information out there? And he goes to I believe the SEC or FINRA or whatever it is, and it falls on deaf ears. They're just not interested. And what's worse is they would then do like a little sort of investigation, like they'd write him a letter and say, Bernie, what's going on? And he'd be like, oh, we're fine here, everything's fine. And then Madoff could turn around and say, we've been, audited by the SEC on multiple occasions, and been vindicated. So what was worse was the lack of activity or interest by the SEC made Madoff look legitimate, not only because they don't hunt people, they don't even look into this stuff, but because when they do look into it, it's so half-hearted that people assume that they looked into it with some meaningful intention, and then think, oh well, since he was cleared, it must mean there's no wrongdoing.
Hello, this is the SEC. Oh, you think you found some corruption? Whoa, you're a whistleblower. Yeah. Great. Well, I'll ask him at the party tonight about this.
Yeah, exactly. We'll discuss it over martinis.
Yeah, Gary's ordered some great caviar. This will be a great conversation to have. We'll get to the bottom of it. Thank you for your call. Thank you for calling Security Exchange Commission. Security and Exchange Omission, maybe is what we should call it. Seriously, maybe Gary's a great guy. Not all people are bad, but it does seem very curious.
Well, it shows you how jaded I've become, yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's enough for tonight. Thank you very much, Clinton.
Sure.
We'll see you guys soon. Stay classy, America.